What's going on, everyone? Excited to again share the virtual stage with Mr. Brandon Jones. So exciting topic here on technology adoption, which I think for a lot of people, they might not think like, ooh, exciting, right? But the reality is, it's probably one of the most important ways, especially companies that are scaling and maybe have invested quite a bit of money in technology, and then as this kind of recession comes, as people think about, okay, we don't have budget to add headcount, it's gone, or any more headcount, or maybe we're pausing or slowing it down, but we need to continue to get productivity from our team. And from Brandon's experience, my experience, I'll have Brandon introduce himself. The ability to optimize the productivity impact of your tools is one of the biggest levers. Candidly, it's one of, if not the biggest lever that organizations have with investments they've already made. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We've got a deck too. So for everyone joining, if you just chat, if you're in LinkedIn, just drop a Y in the comments and we'll make sure to DM you the deck as well too. If you're joining us on Zoom, we will also make sure to send out the deck as well. Feel free, let us know what your role is. We always like to know, hey, what do you do? Again, is this, are you a frontline person who's trying to figure out how to do this yourself? Are you an ops leader? Are you a sales leader? So let Brandon and I definitely know who you are. So without further ado, we're going to jump into it. So Brandon, do you want to kick off? Maybe tell everyone just a little bit, if they don't know you, maybe talk a little bit about your background and what you've been up to.
Absolutely. So great to meet everyone. Brandon Jones. My background's kind of in three parts. One, as a sales ops leader at a few different companies. Two, as a sales leader as well, carried a bag, led a sales team. And three, coming from the consulting side as well. So getting to see a lot of different movies, getting to see a lot of how companies do this. I've seen a lot of implementations of tools and how well they've gotten adopted or not gotten adopted. So I'm also excited to talk about this topic because, to Jake's point, it's really relevant right now when teams are looking at the ROI of their tools.
Exactly. So I'm definitely excited for it as well. And Brandon and I have implemented hundreds and hundreds of tools in Salesforce, et cetera. So we can tell you it's not all roses. So I'm excited for the conversation. If you all don't know Skaled, we are a leading consulting firm. We just got an award recently as one of the top consulting firms in the US, which is exciting. And we help organizations optimize their tech stack. We always have a mindset of you got to optimize a process before you optimize the tech stack, because when you do it backwards, you end up with kind of a Frankenstein tech stack. But today we're going to be really focused on that part of it. So if you or your organization is looking for ways to execute some of this, we've got some things to talk about toward the end, and hopefully this will help you to troubleshoot. But if you need additional help, that's what we're here for. So really excited for the conversation and to get things kicked off. So without further ado, so the state of sales tech adoption, right? For me, when I look at some of these reports, companies in the last year have rolled out a ton of tech, right? 50%, right, have rolled out at least 2 or 3 new sales techs, which is, that's a lot. And then again, learning the tools, again, you can see reps, these tools are getting deployed and the reps are like, I don't know how to use these. I've learned a sales process. I learned MEDPIC or insert methodology, but this is like, what do I do here? So, Brandon, again, how do you see this play out? When you think about adoption, and we're going to talk a lot about it, but, these stats in particular, what are some of the things that you see, impacting that in particular?
Absolutely. The biggest thing impacting this is a plan. And it sounds obvious. I think everyone has great intentions. You see a demo of something, it looks exciting. If you're a sales leader, you've talked to another sales leader who's implemented it and seen how well it's worked for them. And all the effort from this that we see goes into the hype and the upfront sort of excitement about the tool. And then the the follow through just starts to trail off in terms of, well, the tool should do its thing. I've put it out there. It should be working. And
That's
then
right.
that's when we see companies run into this. So I totally agree, Jake. I think it's the follow through and realizing that just getting it out is not enough, where a lot of companies fall apart with new tool adoption.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for a lot of folks, and I was just informed that the chat apparently is turned off, but I'm working behind the scenes to fix part of that. And again, again, and I think Brandon, to kind of lead into it, that's exactly, why this stuff happens, right? It's like a VP of sales talks to a buddy at a conference or, over whatever, and then says, "Oh man, I heard that this tool is the best." And then they go to sales ops. They don't necessarily do the diligence to, talk to their sales leaders or people, and they get pumped up. They say, "Great, go figure it out." And and then, like you said, they get through the implementation. And I think part of it, Brandon, I don't know what you think. I think part of it is some of the technology providers make things sound a little easy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because again, on the sell side, it's almost like why you don't ask the barber if you need a haircut. If they're selling it to you, they want you to feel like you're going to be up and running, hit a button, everything will work.
10
And I
minutes.
think all of us who've used a new tool know that that's not the case. There's a ton of follow through that just has to happen after you get it out to even get it close to adopted.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I'm going to steal the barber. Don't ask the barber if you need a haircut. I mean, usually maybe you do, right? You just get it tightened up. But, I think it's such a good call out. I think and I see this especially with tech companies, right? Where move fast, break stuff, right? And I think sometimes that mindset can be fine in certain parts of the business, but when it comes to anything that involves change management, I'd say that there's like a category of tools that kind of run behind the scenes. So I think for a lot of folks, those are the ones where it's like, okay, like, some of the initial implementation, like a lead routing tool, or something like that. But for a lot of these, really thinking about, the goal. And I think for me, Brandon, I think about this as like a mindset that the goal, so many companies think the goal is implementation. The goal is adoption, right? Like the goal is like, actually people using it, and getting a lot of value. So let's talk through it in this, kind of this vantage point. By the way, marketing team, I love this slide. I think it's such a great explanation of this. So Brandon, talk us through kind of this process and then kind of what you see happens in this kind of crescendo and post crescendo.
Absolutely. So this is the part, and I love this slide as well, that we alluded to earlier when we talked about the peak excitement for a tool coming in the demo, pre-demo, walkthrough, thinking about what the plan is right before you sign, getting right to implementation, and then sort of feeling like, okay, wait a second, this, we were promised that this thing would just turn on and be ready to go. And a lot of these tools, to Jake's point, are pretty simple to turn on. I think we've seen the implementation curve for a lot of these tools getting uh, more, less steep, right? But the piece that I think is not as exciting is the follow through, and you can see on the right there
Mm-hmm.
where you run into trouble where if you didn't have a plan of reinforcing, and we'll talk about this later, of rolling it out, measuring it, most important, reinforcing it with either follow-up trainings, live trainings, doing that through some type of system, and then realizing that that's a curve and that's a circle that you're going to have to go back through to get it right, is where we see that fall off. So everyone's excited about the rollout, but the second half of where it gets tough to create the habit, we just see it's not as an exciting topic. And it's just something that either no one owns or everyone kind of points a finger and says, that's not the thing I'd like to own.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I love this. What I love here, we'll talk about it, is in leadership change, which I mean, look, I think for a lot of people, it's like, oh, well, leadership change is like, no. Like leadership change is like a very real thing, real part of it. I'm sorry. And I think for a lot of this, again, we've talked about some of this in particular, like, again, isn't clear or experienced owner. I also feel like there's just it's so funny because for Salesforce and other parts of the tech stack that are integral, it's like we accept that, like, well, you need to be really good at these tools to make it work. But for some reason, with a lot of these other sales technologies, it's like, you don't need to be an expert in the tool. Like, it'll be fine, right? And like the analogy that you gave. So again, for a lot of you, when you're thinking about these things, it's just, you need an expert, whether it's, us, like their professional services. I don't really care. It's just, if you're going to implement this, you've got to make sure that you get people who have been there and done it multiple times over. Again, it's like, how many of you, virtual raise of hands, how many of you would say, oh yeah, like we're gonna deploy Salesforce, and oh yeah, we're gonna go with somebody who's only done it once, like never before, right? It's the first time. No, you'd be like, oh my God, absolutely not. Of course we're gonna go do XYZ. And I think, look, not every tool requires the same lift, but there's a degree of lift that every tool, really can drive. That needs, right? Every tool needs to be able to drive adoption. So, again, like I kind of talked about this, and we're kind of getting into this change management. Like, what do you like? Change management, I think, Brandon, can be a big topic, right? For some people, right? It's like, oh, change management, it's a lot. How do you think about like the paradigm or the concept of change management, specifically when it comes to, these types of, technology?
Yeah, that one, I love that slide because that one hits home for me where it talks about when you think of implementing a new tool. I think if we've all been on a sales org, we've all been a part of this. It feels like RevOps or sales ops job. So we all kind of look at it as, yeah, we got this new tool. It's getting implemented. Getting that tool out is the job of our tech people, our RevOps or sales ops team. And the call out here to make it successful is that it's everyone's job, from a sales manager to a rep to enablement, back to other folks on the rev team. It's everyone's job to really make the tool successful, because sales ops can build it and get it out the door, but the habit forming, and like Jake talked about with the hype curve, the sort of repetitions and ways that you become an expert at it. You can have all of the sales ops and rev ops people in the world, but building it's not going to help you adopt it. So this is the part where we wanted to really make this part hit home of, it's really everyone on the revenue org's job to make sure that they're involved in not the implementation of the tool, but the sort of reinforcement, making it a part of your day-to-day, figuring it out. If you need help, tapping enablement on the shoulder to say, hey, I need extra training here to know how to do this. And we get it. A lot of times sales teams are moving so fast that you think, I don't need something that's going to slow me down. But it's seeing it as an investment now in figuring it out where you'd gain efficiency later. And this is where, when you see this slide, we're sort of saying that everyone's got to be involved in the implementation and the rollout and the success of the tool. It's not just a sales ops or rev ops job to sort of make that happen for you.
Yeah. And I think we actually, and I don't know if we have the data, or Becca can pull it really quick. I'll tell you that, let me tell you like what I found to be super interesting, Brandon, to this point. I did a survey last week. I think we had a few hundred people respond. And I asked, I said, who's most responsible for adoption, right? Was the survey. And the number one result was frontline sales manager, right? But how many people are actually doing that, right? It was like frontline sales leader. I think then like exec and sales ops were like neck and neck. The reality is, like Brandon said, although senior sales leadership and frontline management should be, they're just not in many cases. We delegate all these things called sales ops, as well. So let's talk about kind of the ideal process, and maybe talk through what that does look like.
So with the ideal process, we alluded to this a little bit, but we see this as a circle. Kind of think of it like a recycling logo, right? Where you continue to go around and around until you've got this figured out. So the planning up front we talked about, that's really important to say from a leadership perspective, who has what role here? So sales ops, your job is to get this thing implemented, tested, make sure that everyone's set up and ready to go. Sales managers becoming the evangelist of a tool. And I've seen this a lot where sales manager may think, I don't think this tool is really that useful. I didn't have this when I sold 10 years ago, therefore I don't think it's worth it, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
sort of trickles down to the rest of the team. The attitude of a sales rep tends to be where the sunshine is. So if their frontline managers focused in a one-on-one on how they're using this particular tool or how it's improving their close rate or conversion, the rep is going to start caring about it because they know they're going to be asked about it. And if their frontline manager has the opposite attitude, reps won't invest the time in adopting something that
Yep.
their manager's not focused on. So what we see here is leadership setting the plan, sales ops executing the implementation plan, sales managers and frontline managers becoming the evangelists and the power users like we've outlined here, having the trainings, uh, sales managers being able to run reports and see and measure what's happening. And that's an important one because we see so
Yep.
much of a reliance on sales ops with reporting, but we believe sales managers should also have that tool and be ready
Yes.
to know how to measure what's going on. And then the last part is continuing to do the measurement, reinforcement, whether it's live training uh, or training through a system, continuing to go through those processes until you get to a point of critical mass with adoption. So this is what we've outlined from how we've seen these engagements and the most successful teams roll out tools that we've helped them either roll out or they've rolled out themselves. That we love this framework and have sort of borrowed it in our thinking.
That's right. Yeah. We've got some questions kind of coming in. All right. This is a great one and like so well timed. So, anonymous attendee, someone was nervous to ask this, Brandon. Um, what should be your steps to re-implement or re-roll out a tool? Right. So, I love this. And actually, I think this is probably what a lot of people thinking, are sitting there thinking about. They're like, makes sense. That's not what happened. So, anyway, um, how do you think about kind of realigning here? So when you think about kind of this kind of framework of people involved, you're a day, day to day, you're thinking about these things. How, what does like the redeployment look like? How do you think about that?
So this is a great one because the redeployment, I've tried and failed at this many times. And what I've found that has worked or have seen other sales leaders do is you've got to build genuine excitement about the relaunch. So first you have to admit that you either failed or the original launch didn't live up to what it was supposed to be. If you lead with that kind of honesty, I think in that sort of empathy about it, I think the team usually buys in because they know you're being authentic, right? So admit that the first go round didn't go the way you planned.
Yes.
Set a date for the relaunch, build excitement around it, whether it's contests, whether it's some kind of incentive. And the other piece of it is including whatever that new tool does, that KPI is now embedded in your sales pipeline reporting. It's embedded in rep dashboards. It's a part of everyone's world. So people can, before it even relaunches, people know that in Q3, Q4, we're measuring this going forward, and here's why. And then the last point I would say is to communicate the sort of the change management plan and make it transparent to everyone what that would look
Yep.
like and let everyone know it's not going to be overnight. But by these milestones, we're going to be here. So you can move slowly with us into the future, but the expectation is that you move. So if you're setting those milestones with the team, they know it's not an overnight change. Again, you're building excitement and you're being authentic about it. I've seen some of the best implementations and adoption plans come from relaunches, come from not using the
Yep.
tool the way you had thought. And oftentimes reps are super open to that because they were also initially excited about something
Exactly.
changing their world. And they love the fact that a sales manager will relaunch something. It really shows you care about the team being successful.
Yeah, and I think too on your last point, that stat we showed at the very beginning, right? 42% of reps feel like they don't get enough training. I think it's 42 or 43, right? And it's exactly what you said. And I think some people might be a little nervous to fall on the sword a little bit and just say like, hey, this was done like you know, and we really believe in it. And the thing I would add too is just like we talked here, is when you do the redeployment, bring the frontline managers back in for the, you know, like they've got to then be the champions, which is the same kind of here, that, you know, hey, what didn't you like? How do you do it? I actually talked to a junior sales ops leader maybe a week and a half ago. And, you know, he was kind of talking about some of these challenges of just process redeployment. And I was like, look, you got to, you know, are you asking your managers what they think? Or are you trying to convince them that this is what they should do? And I can tell you that you're going to get a lot more adoption if the managers feel like they're a part of the process and parts of this are like their idea and input than you ever will if you try to do all this stuff, you know, on your own. So yeah, so here was the 400 respondents from the survey. I guess I jumped the gun a little bit there. But again, I think that the fact that, you know, everyone is kind of highlighting, and the fact that exec sales leadership that, you know, people said should own the adoption. Again, we had 400 respondents. It was all sales leaders and operations leaders, etc. I do feel like the reps one was a little low. You know, what do you think the reps role, Brandon, in the
Yeah.
adoption piece is? Yeah, I was
Well,
kind
I
of
think,
surprised. I was like, people are like, you know, like they're the ones who have to use it. But, you know, out of 400 people like, nah, that's not really their job to own adoption.
so I think this one's pretty telling because when we ran this survey, what we sort of took from it after really digesting it was the fact that this kind of goes back to what we're saying about everyone having a hand in ownership. So the fact that sales leadership, sales ops, and frontline sales managers are almost a toss up, with the reps piece, you know, reps kind of feeling like these other groups need to set it up so that I can be successful, we think makes sense because it's essentially saying everyone's got to have a different part in this to make this thing work. And it's not just on one group. It's not just on um, one sort of piece of the organization to own the success of adoption. So yeah, the reps piece, maybe there's a few people in there that want to push the responsibility, but I think it's important we kind of see them looking to their leadership and looking to the sales ops team to help them sort of help themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would just say, like, if I like the thing I also took away is, as a rep, if I'm sitting there, and there were plenty of reps that responded to this, you know, made up at least, I think, like 40%. I really feel like going forward, you can't afford to not learn these tools. You know, whether you start off using outreach and then you have to use SalesLoft, or you start off using, you know, X, and then it's the way that your leaders are going to expect you to show up is with a knowledge of how to use these tools, right? And again, not every tool. Brandon and I were talking about this the other day about just how many tools there are, and trying to keep up to speed is impossible nearly. But I think reps, what I would say is, if you are a rep and you're tuning in and listening, it is also your responsibility. And I would say, and even if you don't want to do it for the company you're working for, maybe you're just like not excited. I just don't think in 5 years you can be a really, really, really successful, productive seller, maybe certain industries, unless you know the tech, because the tech can just make your life so easy. And so I just encourage all the reps out there to really, you know, think about some of those things. All right. So let's talk about the impact, right, of like what this looks like, right? So again, this is a great, you know, kind of stat here, is like what factors contributed to the ability to hit targets, right? This kind of just reinforces, you know, what we're talking about is the frontline leadership. There's another stat. I think actually, and we might have it in here in a little bit, just around like, you know, where people go for data. Yeah, I think that's coming up next. So again, just think about this, everyone, when you're thinking about, you know, sales tech and any type of change management initiative, that again, what are the things that people called out, right? They called out support. They called out ongoing training. They called out great onboarding experience, right? Great product, obviously that helps, right? Great comp plan, that helps as well. But even more so than a well-documented process. And I think sometimes, you know, companies like are so focused on, I have this perfect sales playbook, not realizing that, again, where people are actually getting value is from some of these other, you know, kind of training or onboarding. So, with all this technology going on, when I think about like, some of these issues, I think about, who is going to one, assess it. Like I said, right now, a lot of organizations do a really poor job of assessing the specific tool set. Instead of really looking at sales tech as a throughput mechanism. And what I mean by that is, like, say you have a long tube and there's different buildups in there that are stopping the water from flowing freely. And instead of us really assessing the journey that the sales reps are go through and customers go through, many times we just see a part of buildup and we're like, oh, let's go fix that. And so we don't really assess the holistic system. And then whenever we pick that, we don't assess the right amount of tools, as a part of this. So again, when I think about this in particular, assess is big to me. Again, Brandon and I have talked a little bit about implement it and also then, like ongoing manage. How do you think about like the ongoing management, Brandon? Because again, I think so, like, let's say, all right, and because this is what I see even with companies that kind of think that they're best in class. They're like, okay, we did what you said. We've got an implementation plan. Now we've got, a decent amount of people. What does like ongoing management mean to you?
So the ongoing management part is interesting because it's one of those things where we showed that slide before about everyone having a hand in it. So I think the misinterpretation about the ongoing management is that it's one part of the rep org's job and everyone else sort of, has done their part to get it to this point, whether it's exec leadership of assessing it, sales ops of implementing it. So everyone kind of feels it's not their job, right, to sort of management. Everyone's kind of feel like they've done their job. And this is where we think it's a little bit of everyone. So it's sales leaders, exec leadership, putting sunshine on it each week with the team and measuring it and say, hey, I'm looking at this. It's on my dashboard. It's a part of my world. I'm looking and I'm measuring this to see if we need to reinforce it to get it adopted. With sales ops, it's making sure that folks know how to run those reports and they have the access to the data, and if the data needs to be cleaned up, et cetera, but it's visible to the groups. And then with the management, the part of owning it with manage it with frontline managers is talking about it, again, making it a part of their reps world, saying, hey, I'm checking in with you. I noticed you weren't using this new tool that we implemented. You're still using the old system for this, or you're still using a manual email send or workaround. I want to know, and I'm not accusing you, but I want to know why, what's going on, and what can we improve? What can we do to help reinforce this for you? So a lot of times reps who need help aren't going to raise their hand. They're just going to continue doing it the old way. So it's up to all three of those groups, sales ops to provide the visibility, the leadership to say, we're measuring this, we have eyes on it, and your frontline managers to check in, again, they're measuring, but they're also seeing where they need to reinforce with reps adopting. So you've noticed the theme with our answer on this, but it's all three of those groups' job to manage, measure, reinforce.
Yeah. And the thing I'll add to that is the other part to me of why management matters so much is these tools are evolving so quickly. And that example you gave of the rep, right, who's kind of using the tool, it's, outreach comes out with their commit plans. Okay, what are we doing around that? And I think it's like that needs to be deployed. And so I think of too is like these tools are evolving so quickly that if you're not thinking about this as being like an ongoing, kind of day to day, almost like, I think people think about the website, where the website's never done, it's always evolving, the tech stack and each tool that you build, or build on top of, and each tool you build from, new processes, evolves just so quickly, right? And again, I think a lot of people understand to use it, but the manage it's the big one here. All right, so we broke down a little bit of this already around, again, especially like manage like frontline leaders. Like I said, if you want now, this is a good spot to do a screenshot of just kind of how to think about this. And the same answer, this really applies to that question that we got earlier. And feel free to drop some additional questions that you all have. Brandon and I love to kind of hop in and start to answer those. But just think about these processes And you don't have to have a perfect mix of like, it's just the decision makers, it's just the ops. Again, as we've talked about, there should be kind of others involved here. These are the people that are, actually going to do the work many, many times. But there's just such an opportunity here that to just take a little bit of extra time, what we're talking about now to a lot of people might sound like a ton of extra work. Like, oh my gosh, it's this, it's that, it's this. The reality is it's all in like the planning phase. It's like, if you just do a little bit of additional work in the planning phase of how you're going to assess the tools, making sure that you've got a strong implementation, manage an ongoing management plan, take the extra 10 to 15 hours. My commitment and promise to everyone listening is you are going to save yourself 10x that amount with a big team post trying to fix everything and trying to triage. And I see this in a lot of parts of business, not just rolling out tech, where we just want to jump into it, roll it out, a process. And it's like, no, spend the extra time to like plan the whole thing out. And I think you'll see a big uptick in this. So this is a great graphic, and again, you kind of hinted at this in your answer around, manage it. So talk about this, how do you think about this kind of like ultimate adoption, right? So I'm using this, etc. Like, what's that mechanism look like to get adoption initially?
Yeah. So we made this sort of circle, this continuous circle, because we've seen companies, and I've done this, I've been guilty of this. We've seen companies put this on a slide and show their team as a single linear line of, we're going to train you on it. We're going to, and maybe they say measure, maybe they don't, right? They might sprinkle in some reinforcement, but at the end, there's always adoption. And it's this sort of start to finish line that has no revisiting of any steps. So we put this in this format on purpose because you might have to go around this 5 times before you really get it. But what we see with this is the train piece. This is the planning Jake mentioned of the rollout, making sure you've got the right folks that have the right responsibilities to make this tool successful and get the information out about it, the documentation, et cetera. So most teams understand this part, right? This is the excitement around it. The measure piece is really important because of the fact that we mentioned it seems intuitive, that people think they'll just kind of know if people are using it, or they'll raise their hand, but oftentimes they don't. And if they know that you're not looking at it, they're going to know that they don't have to do it. So if it's not a part of your world as a sales leader, as an executive, as a frontline manager, and they know it's not a part of what you're looking at, people are going to be able to coast under the radar and just, again, continue to do their day-to-day because it's additional work to learn something new, even if it gives you efficiency later. The reinforcement part here, and this is where we think this is where frontline managers are critical in being that evangelist and understanding the nuance of a rep maybe not telling you that they want help, but asking why they might be doing something the old way, like we talked about, when you've got a new way to do it that's better. So if you don't have an LMS, that's okay. LMS is a great way to reinforce it, but you can also do this with live training, just setting time on. This could be office hours. This could be just time blocks where you've got as a sales team where you do skill development, right, on some kind of cadence, but you can easily slot those things in. And again, don't be afraid with this to go around multiple times. We see teams that feel like the adoption or the rollout is failing because they've had to do reinforcement multiple times. They'll tell us, yeah, we trained on this 2 times already. We don't know why everyone doesn't get it. But with a lot of this stuff, it's not that people don't get it. It's that they have to believe that it can change their life. They have to believe that it's going to change and really make them more successful. And oftentimes the 3rd or 4th time you train on it, reps appreciate that. Sales managers, again, continue to be the evangelists and push it. You'll get that adoption that you're looking for. And oftentimes you'll get it better than the person who told you about the tool in the first place, better than they had it set up on their side. So we hope this tactical piece of kind of walking through that framework is helpful for everyone. And again, remember the format of this is intentional. It's a circle. It's not so when you do your next rollout, we don't want to see a straight line from start to finish on the slide. We want to see the cycle.
I love it, man. And I think, we go into so many orgs that invest hundreds, if not, hundreds of thousands, some of the big ones, millions of dollars in sales tech. And it's kind of always shocking to me, the measure piece in particular, that even, again, like to your point, because it's just like train and reinforce, is that straight line. And they don't have it set up. It's like, there is no reporting. And it's like, how did you think that you're going to get adoption if, there's what's the old saying? It's like, measure what matters and what matters gets measured, or something like that.
Yep.
Again, to your point, like if you're not measuring it, one, like, how do you know what to reinforce? How do you know what changes to make? Gut? Is it like, if you're not measuring like very specific points of the journey of what's working and what's not working based on that specific tool, wow, you are wasting a lot, we are wasting a lot of people's time on fixing the wrong problem, or fixing a problem that's not the right thing, because we didn't measure it correctly, and we think, or, we heard some grumblings, and so we start to reinforce something that doesn't actually solve. And so, what I love about this is the measure piece, which kind of leads into the next, piece here. You and I were kind of talking about this beforehand in our prep session last week, of like, okay, because I like to get real tactical. If you could do one thing, like, what would the one thing be that would move the needle for this, right? Because a lot of people are like, okay, cool. Like, what is there, like one kind of like hack? And it was interesting because we both kind of said the same thing. Also, before I kind of reveal this, and I'll have Brandon. So we literally, as we speak, just implemented this new free, it's basically a usage gap analysis, which is it's a pretty awesome platform. It's going to be live on the website at some point in the next few weeks. That will help you to understand like how well, like, or has your team actually adopted it? And we put in the chat outreach. It's really, if you're using any sales engagement platform, this analysis will be helpful for you. If you're using Salesforce, we've got a CRM gap analysis. If you're using a sales engagement platform, we've got a sales engagement analysis. So if your team is having adoption issues with either of those two tools, either CRM or sales engagement, we just dropped it. Brandon is actually going to has like some very specific meeting time blocks dedicated to talking through our usage gap analysis. So sign up. It's 100% free. It's a new process for us. We'd love to get feedback, again, like if it's helpful, etc. So this is something that we're offering up. I want everyone to go fill Brandon's calendar up. It's not like he has a department to run or anything as well, but we'll figure that part out. But it really is a great opportunity to really understand what, if you're worried about, your own analysis, or maybe you're just like, I think we're doing okay with our, Salesforce or HubSpot CRM. I think we're doing okay. But yeah, if I can get an outside set of eyes who sees, and his team sees 100 plus of these different variations of tools, book time, 100% free. And then before we kind of like answer this and kind of wrap up here a little bit, we did get another question in that I think is a really, really good one. Question is, should ownerships of continued adoption continue to be a combination effort? So there's really never a handoff period. I think I had mentioned that everyone should own a piece. How do you think about that? And you've kind of talked about this, but and even that, the slide before here, if I go back, this kind of ongoing, like there's never really a handoff. What is that frontline manager's role maybe in this?
Yeah, and I think this person who asked this is exactly right, because there is really no handoff. There is more of a relay race that you start to run together. So if you think about handing off a baton in track and field, you're not handing off the baton because your job in that next phase to help a frontline sales manager is different than their job, but you're both going to run together toward the goal. So I think the person who asked this is exactly right to say that the sort of in parallel process, so a sales ops person running together with a frontline manager, the sales ops person being responsible for visibility. So if the frontline manager should never have to say, hey, I'd like to measure this, I'd like to reinforce it, but I don't have visibility into, is the tool working or not, or is my team using it or not? So that sort of usage, visibility, metrics, KPIs, sales ops is running with the baton hand in hand with the frontline sales manager. And like we mentioned, the frontline manager is listening for what's being said and what's also not being said by reps, and what's being done and what's also not being done. So their job is really nuanced in the sense that they need to have ears on the street and really understand and be that evangelist, like we mentioned, to say, I notice you're not using this, or I notice you're using that. And another good point we want to highlight with this to make it more successful is the more a frontline manager can highlight specific folks on the team who are doing it well
Yes,
and
exactly.
lift them up and sort of give them their kudos and praise. If other reps see that a top rep or someone they respect on the team is using it and is having success, that's one of the easiest ways to get it. It's one thing if it's coming from your exec team or frontline manager even, or even sales ops. People tend to filter those emails. It's another thing when it's a person that's
My
also in the
peer.
trenches with them that's having success too.
That's 100%. And we find that whether it's sales tech adoption or a new process or methodology, the peer stories, the peers of like, because you can't argue. There's no like, we think that this is best or whatever. It's like, I'm using this and this is how it's working. You know, we've seen that exact same mindset help with people getting over the fear of cold calling, people implementing a new tool or trying a new, trying video for the first time, for example. So that peer to peer and manager to manager is such a critical part of that continuous loop. It's not like, hey, well, we're deploying it, let's do some of this, and then we kind of forget about it, we move on to the next thing. It's kind of continual. So you and I aligned on this one thing that you can do. Managers learning how to build reports, or like, why is this what you picked, that the one thing that will move the needle is someone's ability to build a report?
Because it's the number one objection we see as to why a manager didn't have visibility into what was going on with their team. And it's an easy crutch. It's easy to say, well, I didn't know because I couldn't check for myself.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. So what we see with this one is if you empower your frontline managers to have the basic, and again, Jake and I aren't talking about building complex dashboards, but
No.
a simple report to get the information that they need, and that they're being measured on ultimately, it really empowers that person to take charge on their own and even tweak something where they don't have to go ask sales ops to do it or rep ops to do it. They can tweak something and start to get really creative of seeing data in a different way. And they'll also know better when they do make those requests of the ops team. They'll know better about what they are really asking for. So they'll be able to have better asks to say, I can kind of see it this way, but I also looked at cutting it this way. So it's a symbiotic relationship that starts to build. But if you don't empower your frontline managers to be able to do that, oftentimes they're not going to even use the reports that you build for them as a sales ops team, because they just don't have the efficacy kind of to even dive into them. They might be afraid of them, and it changes the whole dynamic. So if you can do this, from what I've seen personally, some of the best reps with like the highest performing reps were the ones who could build their own report and do their own sort of quick and dirty analysis of their pipeline and know what was going on.
That's right. Yeah. And again, like it's also the reps too. Like for me, like I think about a lot of reps. It's, I was talking to a group of SDRs at a kickoff on Tuesday, sales kickoff. And, I told them a story about like me and building stuff, model like this, like model in Excel when I was like my very first year out of college. And I was, when I tried to tell them like, I don't need my boss to tell me how I'm performing or not. Like I need to know how I'm performing so I can optimize my performance. And I think a lot of reps right now, kind of outsource that knowledge and like, well, someone will tell me. And kind of what I challenge them is like, CRM data or data from your sales engagement platform, it's not for your boss, it's for you. And so, if you're a frontline manager and you're trying to get that information, or you need to learn how to build reports. I would argue that most reps need to learn how to, build, or at least know what they're asking for when they go to sales ops to kind of build reports. So I will double down on build reports. If you teach someone how to build reports, they can measure it, and that takes care of a key piece of the loop. All right. So takeaways here. Implementations are a change management exercise. It is not a plug something into Salesforce or HubSpot exercise. Managers, all right. If you do not realize that Brandon and I believe that managers should be very involved in this, you have not been listening, because we believe leadership is key. And candidly, everyone apparently thinks that, but you actually have to do it. And you have to say, okay, it's okay that I pulled my frontline managers away for 5 hours over the course of an initial, deployment. And then obviously we need them for a little bit more to make sure that it actually works. And that leadership needs to know the landscape, right? Leadership has to, and how we've done this is any big change management initiative, what you should do is really think about having a senior leader kick off with the why. Every sales leader, every sales rep, they just want to know what's happening. Nobody likes to get stuff thrown on them. Remember when your parents said just because? Like, you hated that, right? Nobody's like, oh, I love that, right? Like, nobody wants to just have these things thrown at them. So senior leadership really needs to explain the why. And we've seen, these change initiatives go so well. So, prior to a training in your implementation, have a senior leader. Hey guys, let's talk about why we're doing this. What's in it for you? And it can just have a massive impact. So 2 quick things. One, we dropped in the chat. We've got a couple of events coming up, and which I'm really excited about. One is with the folks over at Sales Hacker. We're talking about ways to cut through the noise. If you are in Austin, make sure to swing by next Thursday. We've got kind of a sales tech talk happy hour. I'm going to be there, talking about sales and tech, but it's just more of a chance to kind of meet and mingle. Go ahead, and even if you're not in Austin, feel free. Like, we're going to be doing these, and I think we've got Chicago coming up and a few other places that we're going to be doing this. So even if you're not in Austin, you can feel free. We dropped the link there. We mentioned this. Brandon is going to be doing a usage gap analysis for people to book. The book time, we've dropped that in the chat, so you can do that. And, parting thoughts for you, Brandon, as we kind of like come to an end here. A lot of cool stuff going on, kind of in this world and things that we're doing. Any parting thoughts for anybody who's listening and is like, okay, cool. Like, other than what we just walked through, maybe these are 1 or 2 of my takeaways.
Yeah, parting thoughts would be, recognize that it takes a village to make a tool successful. And no matter how simple to set up and flashy and easy that the person, selling you the software is going to make you think, those things can still be true. But to make that tool actually run and hum like you're seeing in the demo, like you're, idealizing for your team, and that it could help, it takes a village. And we mentioned who those actors are, but it really takes your sales leadership team. It takes frontline managers. It takes sales ops to all get reps bought in and to get them successful. So we want to help you guys do that. We've seen the ups, we've seen the downs. I've personally been through both, in having good rollouts, having bad rollouts. So again, more than happy to help. And we've got that free usage gap analysis. We'd love you guys' feedback on it. Again, it's no obligation. We really want to help you dig in and see more folks be successful with tech rollouts, particularly in this macroeconomic environment where
Exactly.
dollars spent are super important, and you don't want to waste money on new tech.
That's right. And a lot of times you've already bought it. So why not make
Yep.
it amazing? So a lot of great insights in here. Brandon, you're the man. Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation as always. If you signed up on the Zoom, we'll be sending this out. If you're on LinkedIn, just drop a Y, or you can DM me and we'll make sure that we DM you all the details as well. So book your time with Brandon. I hope this helps some folks out there, even if you don't. Kind of get a handle on maybe why things didn't work and how to make it work. So Brandon, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, everyone else. We'll see you here in a few weeks.